Welcome back to Getting in the Way. My name is Chad, and I'll be your host. I have my good friend Ryan here, and today we're going to talk about counting all as loss. Can you ever imagine letting everything, person, or place go? You think, why would I do that? All of these things lost for a relationship with our Creator. Let's talk about this. I'm going to give you some examples of things, people that I had to let go or count as lost: family members, friends, or what I called friends that I'd known for a long time. Anyone who would try to stay in a transactional relationship.
Chad, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the opportunity. It's cool to see this thing happening. First, thank God that we're here together and we get the opportunity to do this. I guess I'll start off just by saying, we're talking today about what do we count as loss? And you and I have talked extensively in person about this. And for me personally, especially over the course of the past year, I've learned that all of it, right? I got to count it all as loss. Anything that I make more important than God is the first thing that comes between me and God. I've lost people that I care about, not to death, but just when we have this going on in our life. I like to say it as God picks our friends. It's very true because the people that want to have transactional relationships, or the people that want to engage in lying in order to have dialogue with each other, those things that we can't compromise on, those people tend to remove themselves from my life. We're talking about there's other things that I could put in front of my relationship with God. I can get wrapped up in money, or people is one of mine. Relationships, whether it be a relationship with a woman, a relationship with one of my kids, family members, anything that anything that I would be willing to lie for or make more important than the truth, or prioritize over my relationship with God. Anything that would make me compromise my core principles that keep me in direct alignment.
I was thinking the people and the things are definitely things that got in my way and still try to this day. But there's something that really jumped out at me, and it was ideas. Wrong teachings, though they might sound morally correct, politically correct, society accepts them. Those are some of the harder things for me to let go as I'm looking at it. I think you covered what happens with the people pretty well, and it can be our children or our parents, and the closest things to us are the most likely. We care about those things. We know those things so well. They make it difficult, and I don't believe that those people intend to try to take the place of our Father. I just don't think that's what's in the front of their mind. That's not the intention. So how could that happen if these people are not trying to take the place of our Creator?
They don't know. That would be the only logical answer. I find that pretty often in my relationships, my relations with people, especially people you spend a lot of time with, coworkers, family members. It's like they know not what they do, would be the best way to put it. That's the words that come to mind. And I think that part of what's going on with that is that society pats us on the back for so many things. We're taking those pats on the back for a lot of wrongs that we don't realize are wrong because we grow up being lied to about what's right and wrong. And really, we grow up being lied to about a whole lot more than that, right? And so if we haven't had an awakening, we're going through society and life in the way that it is now, we're getting patted on the back for all kinds of wrongs. All kinds of wrongs. Putting all this false idolship that we have in society today, the ideas like what you were saying, like, one that comes to mind is the American dream, right? People, you hear that phrase, the American dream. Well, what's the American dream? When you talk about the American dream with the average American, God is not in the conversation at all. It's about cars, and it's about money, and it's about having the wife and the house and the picket fence and the American dream, right? So somewhere along the lines there, we've been mixed up with what's truly important, I think.
I agree with that. The importance has been shifted. So I guess what I would like to get to is, how did you go about counting those things as loss?
Well, first of all, I surrendered my life, my will, my want to, over to God up until death. And hopefully after. It's such a loaded question because we could go on about that kind of a thing for hours, right? But once the Spirit entered me and I recognized it, it was possibly always there, but I recognized it as being what it is. And once I had a conscious contact with God, all the other stuff seemed not as important. It's just not as important as that, because I've had the experience of doing His will and seeing what that looks like. Now, I try to stay in that, doing His will, right? And so that's what I pray for, is doing His will as much as I possibly can, and that's the goal. But then there's stuff that I don't see as well, where I'm still doing His will, and maybe it ain't as fun, right? But that stuff, seeing the fruit of it, and even especially more so in other people's lives, there's nothing like it. It gives me a purpose. I fell in love with God and His purpose for my life. When it happened to me, everything else just seemed so much less important. The things that I used to, I would break my back for money, work crazy hours, or to provide for the family, right? Because this was all the image, the idea that I had of how things were supposed to look. And that's where society, I wanted that pat on the back, so that's in today's society and in today's world, that's winning, so to speak, right? And what that's fulfilling is self. That's fulfilling self. If I'm trying to live that way to impress others, to make myself look better, that's all self-will. Having that realization that God had a purpose for me that wasn't all about me, that I could fulfill His purpose and be a part of His plan, part of the world, be able to help other people with that. That's really where it just, everything else kind of fell. Priorities kind of fell, and that's not to say that I'm not guilty. There's times, I'm human. And so there's times where I've gotten off track, where I'll put a person up on a pedestal, or, a thing, or a goal, even a job, a goal, these things, and lose sight of, is this what's most important to God? Is this what God's plan is for my life? Right. And so then there is the struggle. You go through that, and you can, after you get out of that and you're connected again, and you're like, wow, that was rough. You let me go through that, and I appreciate it. But then you see the growth from the other side, and it's like a lesson that you don't have to keep learning over and over, so to speak. You don't have to keep going through the pain to get to the growth, because you've already gone through that pain. And if you're willing to see the truth about it, right, you're willing to see, okay, this was my will taken over, and now I kind of got a little uncomfortable there, because my connection was not where it should be, right? And so you get on the other side of it, and you're like, wow, that was rough. Thanks for letting me experience that. because now I know better and I won't do that again. Now I'm still going to continue to make mistakes and continue to go through those growth processes. But that's the faith building as well, is when you get out on the other side of it and you're like, whew, that was a wild one, stuff like that. So I'm human. And so humanly things tend to get in the way of my spirituality sometimes. But as I learn these lessons, then the growth happens, and sometimes the growth is painful. I can kind of tell and I can kind of feel it but I know that I'm going to come out on the other side with some kind of growth. Whenever life is getting uncomfortable or something, maybe it's a blessing that I missed because I took my will back. And then I know that there's another side to it, that I'm going to keep the faith and I get to the other side of it and I get to see the growth afterwards. So even the growth processes are a beautiful thing.
I like what you said about how just once you turned your will over to God, those things started happening. Mm-hmm. So what I gathered was it would be kind of hard to know what or who and in what order to count as loss. Mm-hmm. That we would have to rely on the Spirit you mentioned that you were filled with mm-hmm. upon giving your life over. Mm-hmm. And it made me remember a time when I was shown I had to give something up, and I was asked a lot of questions in a row. And the reason I was asked those questions was because I was asking questions. And every time I asked a question, I would get one back. I'll go ahead and tell the story because not putting anything before God, it was one of my first lessons. It was about a thing. When I first had this experience, I thought I was going to help people, like I could even help myself, right? Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to help people, and I got rid of a car that I had, and I got a van. And I thought, well, I'm going to replace this, give people rides. I felt really compelled to get one. So I credit that to God. But as time went on, I did use this van for that, some, but not a lot of people was wanting to ride with me places or be around me. You could say what was within me. So it wasn't working out the way I thought. And I met a man at a little small gathering who was telling about how his car had broke on the way there. I didn't really know him. I knew his first name. I didn't know his last name. I couldn't not think about it after I left there. And that night I was thinking about it, and I woke up in the morning and I started asking some people at his house I was at, hey, do you think we could do some things to get something together to try to help this guy? I didn't know if it was to help him get his car fixed or find him a different car, but I knew that I was supposed to do something. When I don't know exactly what that is, I'll start coming up with things. So this is the way I was going about it. And then I was driving down the highway a little bit later after asking people what we could do, and I started getting questions. There was nobody else in the vehicle with me. I was driving said van at the time. Nobody else in there. And I start hearing a feeling, we'll call it. Why would you ask those people for that help? I ask you. Well, I thought I was going to get more and better and I was reminded that's not what I was asked to do. And why would you try to do that when you have what is needed? I have what's needed. I don't have an extra. Oh, you mean this car, this van that I'm driving? Well, that's what broke down on the side of the road. He had a van. He gives lots of people rides. Well, I got this because I thought you wanted me to help. You thought. So do you think that I cannot help you get something else? Oh, I don't think that at all. Do you not know that that's how you even have this? How you even are here? Oh, I know that. I just got this done to it, and I'm doing all these things, and I keep, like I'm going to remind God what I'm doing with what he told me to do. And I asked several questions. Well, what if I, and what if, and there was always, it's not what I was directed.
Mm.
So after, do you believe I could get you something different, something more? And I kept saying, well, of course I believe this. A question came to me, and it was, Chad, do you know how you say you would not trade this feeling that you have inside you when you're sharing what I've done for you, that you would not trade that for any amount of money, that you wouldn't trade it for nothing? I say, sure, I know that. I say it all the time. And then the last question came. Are you only saying it? And of course, God was right about everything. Without him, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have been doing that. I wouldn't have had that thing. I would have nothing. I had to ask all these questions. What if I did this? What if I did that? I had to count that loss. I wouldn't have had it anyway. He was right. I wouldn't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to do that with several things. And always, every time, has blessed me with something much greater. And I don't even need whatever it was that he gave me, because the feeling, not that just happened to me, but whoever it was that he was blessing through me, like, my goodness, it was worth any. Like he said, remember when you say you wouldn't trade that feeling? Every time he can do that. That was one of the first lessons with counting things as loss. And I guess once you have nothing and you don't even care to have your own life, it becomes a little easier to count those things as loss. Now, when you start getting those back, you want to start to try to keep them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And with what you were saying, he will remind us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't tell that story to make anyone think, oh, wow, he's so generous, what a good, because I would never do that. Of my own, without the help of God, without the direction of,
Mm-hmm.
that's not something I would do. Even if I could, let's hypothetically could, you know how you was, my arm being a cast, sling, because I done broke it, patting myself on the back. But I've had to do that with lots of things. Everything I thought I knew about religious matters, political matters,
Mm-hmm.
family things, everything, every idea, I had to set them aside. Some of them were not wrong, but most were. That's one of the examples that God used to show me things don't matter. They're all his.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I have is his. I just get to steward it today.
Yeah.
The people in my life, they're his. My children are his before they're mine. And my wife is his before she's mine. It has to be that way.
Yeah.
I have to always remember that I and everyone I know and everything I have belong to him, our creator. And if I start to let anyone or anything matter more than what matters most, I'm headed for destruction. I will start to lose those things. Probably in the order I made them the most important, as you talked about earlier. I'll close with a question. Can you think of anything or anyone that you might be letting matter more than it or they should? Thank you, Ryan, for showing up.
Thank you, brother.
And with that, we'll wrap this up. I'll holler at y'all later.